Okay, here's the boards, completely laminated. The two on the right are the new ones. You can see them. The one on the left is for Goofy Foot Rider. You can see the shapes there on the right for a regular foot rider. Here I have some hardwood blocks that I'm putting into the deck of the boards. And here you can see what happens if your router is dull. It'll melt the foam. So you want a nice sharp router bit. And here I've cut out using the router bit, and I've got to go through 2 layers of glass and the door skin. And so once that is done, then I use a screwdriver and basically just gouge out the foam. Here you just gouge it out because I'm going to insert those blocks in there, and it's safer to gouge it out with a screwdriver than try to use the router, where you might go through the bottom of the board. There you can see the board ready to insert the blocks, and here I'm mixing up the epoxy. So you mix up a little bit of epoxy first, then you add this Cabasil, and you want it nice and thick, like thick icing, as I'm demonstrating here. And then what you do is you pour it into those holes, and then you just jam those blocks in there. And here I'm showing how I take my squeegees and just pour that stuff on them, because it's easy to break all that epoxy off the squeegees and reuse them. There you can see all the blocks inserted into the deck of the boards. And as soon as those are hard, I grind them down. And here you can see that they've been ground down. There's a bit of a close-up view. And then this shows me grinding on them. It's just a short clip because I won't bore you with this. But I put that 10-pound weight on the board to keep it from kicking around if it should happen, because that white epoxy paste wasn't completely dry. And there's the finished inserted boxes. And here is my rocker jig. Now I'm double checking the rocker of the boards. There's a little head point where I have the hyper kick on it. Now you can see how the nose is just hyper kicked up, which really isn't the nose because the board is bidirectional, but you can see how well it fits in the rocker jig. And this is the key to making a good board, is you get a rocker that works and then you stick with it. And that's what I've done with these 2 boards. And there you see them ready. I've put a hot coat on the deck. Oh, and I've glassed over, I've capped the inserts. And now you can see me, I'm getting ready to grind on the bottom. This is the next day, and I have to grind off all those laps there that you see. And so I take my little 10,000 RPM grinder from Harbor Freight, and I go to town there. Now you're only going to see a few seconds of me doing it, because it actually takes a lot more time. Probably work about a half an hour on each board to grind the area down. You have to be super delicate. I'm using a flap disc, and you have to be super delicate and careful not to cut through the glass. And I'm taking out some extra resin that also filled into the concaves, and so it takes some finesse. You don't want to be hacking away on this, or you can really cause some damage. There you see me grinding along the rail there, and then there I'm working into one of my concaves, one of my asymmetrical concaves. I'm grinding out any excess resin that might have pooled in there. You try to scrape out as much as you can when you're laminating, but you also have to avoid creating any air bubbles. And so that's a real trick. And you end up sanding. Most shops will sand, do this hot coat, then they'll do a gloss coat, and then they have a guy who's a polisher. He comes in and polishes the boards to shop quality, and I'm not doing that because these are just my personal boards. Now after using the grinder, I take a block here with 80 grit sandpaper, and I sand down the board. And that works good for me. In fact, I raced on a speedboard back in about 1986, and broke a record. I think I went about 40 miles an hour, which was fast back then because we were on wave sails. This was on a windsurf board, and I had the bottom just sanded with 120 grit, just like I'm doing here. But the whole bottom was sanded with 120 grit, and then I'm sanding the rails here also, cleaning those up. But I don't even put a hot coat on the rail because I kind of like that that textured part of it, because it's actually sort of hydrophilic, meaning it loves the water, so the water attaches to the rails. And since these boards are designed to give you control so you can fly the kite much more aggressively than you otherwise would do it, I want a hydrophilic rail and a hydrophobic bottom. So, here's an old board. This board was made 25 years ago in the year 2000 in my friend Jimmy's shop. Jimmy actually made the board pursuant to my design. You can see that bevel there. This was back in the day when we had the two-line kites and there was no D-power. So if you got overpowered with a kite, you got teabagged is what we called it. You got dragged across the water sideways. And all you can do is stand there and go sideways downwind. Now you can see that I'm setting the fin here, and I use that piece of aluminum, and I want the angle of the fin pointed at the nose, at the center of the nose. And there you can see I've got the fin mounted in the board with this backing plate on it, and that is one of the traction flutes that has the words power loop in it. In fact, these boards really don't need fins, but it's just a nice added touch. And there's only one little fin in these boards. That's because I want them to be able to flip back and forth, no problem. There's a whole bunch of other boards that I've made. I've made a lot of boards. Some don't work the way I like, and some do. And so now that I've got the rocker line dialed in, and here I'm ready to go to the beach.